All right, so welcome to the season 1 character creation workshop for Shadows of Vardoran. Woo! I'm going to talk about my process for creating characters and all that good stuff. Who am I? I was Nell last season. I was Memoria the season before, Hush the season before that, and I will be Scarlet this upcoming season. I have about 10 years of like DMing under my hat. I also, was like an MMO RP girly. Yeah, I've got that tenure. I did like I have like 4,000 hours in Guild Wars 2, and probably 3/4 of it is RPing in Divinity's Reach and not actually playing the game. So I have a lot of experience role playing in a lot of different spheres. So this is me sharing my experience and expertise with you, but that does not mean that you have to take my word as law. Obviously, everyone's process is different. As with all creative ventures, something that works for me may not work for you. Something that works for you probably wouldn't work for me. This is not me trying to be like preachy or imply that this is the right way to do things. This is just my process. And if you just take one piece from it, that's great. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. A lot of this will be advice about like how to integrate into this space, specifically if you've never RP'd here on our server with us before, or if you've never done this style of RP. But a lot of this is just, this is where I'm coming from. There's no right, no wrong answer. As with all creative things, you are your own beast, and you have your own process. So yeah, find what works for you. But I hope that you get something out of this. So with the approach, I want to start by looking at the two main places that people come to us from and kind of explain what's different. So, obviously with Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs, you're going to be approaching things from a different perspective because you're all stuck at a table together. There's sort of like that innate forced proximity, and the DM has handled the pacing and plotting for you. While, yeah, you can like decide to murder a whole village and like ruin the pacing for your DM, there's a lot less onus for pacing on the player. That's going to be something that the DM sets. The DM is going to keep you on rails. They might let you take a curve here and there. But at the end of the day, there's a lot less responsibility on the player to deal with things like pacing. And also, you're stuck at a table with people. So, like, let's say you're doing something that's like vampire related. One of your characters at your table is experiencing blood frenzy. You, as the other people at the table, have to deal with that blood frenzy because you're all like a foot away from each other and have to address it, right? Like, you're not gonna just go on with Jim blood frenzying in the corner. You're gonna deal with the issue and move on. With this, a lot of people are going to pop in and out of your story at points, but not be there for every single beat of it, because that would be impossible. Unless you're literally attached at the hip to another character, no character will be in every scene that you are in except for you. So because of that, there's sort of a different dynamic between you and your fellow player character, because you're going to miss beats of other people's story, and other people are going to miss beats of your story. So someone might pop into a scene where you're experiencing blood frenzy and be like, I'm not in the mood for blood frenzy RP, and leave. And that's fine. That's up to them. So there's kind of a different dynamic between you and your fellow player, and you and like the kind of proverbial DM that is the admin collective. Just because the pacing is going to be different, because also you can miss beats of the admin story. You may not be present for all of it, and that's okay. But that's sort of, there needs to be a little bit of a different expectation of how you approach plot and pacing and like railroad tracks and all that stuff. And then there's also a difference between like the archetypes that work and like the smaller burst RP. Because a lot of times when you're at a table, you'll RP for like 5 minutes, and then you're back to rolling dice, talking about game mechanics, talking about how you're gonna like move your character, especially in combat and stuff. So it's more like smaller burst of like you're in character for a couple of like, for a couple minutes, and then you go to doing other things. This is not like that, because you are in character 100% of the time. So your character has to be something that you can be 100% of the time. I'll talk a little bit later about certain archetypes that are really D&D heavy but don't really work here. And I'll get further into why. You need to remember that you're going to be in character 24/7. Like, I know Dash School here had a little bit of an issue last season because he was a character that could only say the word peanut. And so he's like, yeah, I'm not having any conversations. So I'm a little bored because my character only says peanut, which is fair and valid. And we all love Peanut very much. Let that man talk. Put him on the stand. But, there's those things to consider. Can you just say peanut for a whole season? Or are you going to need to have conversations? And then with MMORP, it's kind of the opposite. It's the other extreme, where rather than just having 5 people or the only people you talk to, a lot of times in MMOs, it's like you go to a bar and you'll just see people in passing, especially if you're in a larger community. There's a lot of people that you see fucking once. And you know that they're around because they have friends and like they're obviously like in a guild. You never see that guild again. They're gone. There's a lot more like passive RP where your ships passing in the night. MMORP is for the most part also text-based, and while we do have text-based RPers here, it is primarily voice. Probably about 95% of the server is talking in character with their real human voice through the in-game VC, and then like typing out their emotes in the chat box. Ev here in the audience is one of the people who does only use text RP. Like Node primarily uses text RP. There are people that do it, but I'm saying that as the majority, most of the people are voice and text as a combination. Like if you're at a party and there's 40 people, everyone switches to text because fuck trying to talk over each other. All that good stuff. MMORP is also a little bit more nebulous when it comes to plot and pacing because you can literally play the same character for a decade. Like in Guild Wars, for example, I've had my main, my Guardian, I've been RPing on her since the game came out. So that's like 13 years of just like in and out RP. And she's changed a little bit. She's kind of like gone through some arcs. But she's fundamentally the same lady because that's just kind of the nature of that. Whereas most of the time with this sort of stuff, you're going to have a more character development in less time because there is an end date. We will have wipes. We will have seasons that end. And so you want to kind of plan your character with that arc in mind. And then, with Guild RP, a lot of times you're just RPing with like the same collection of like 20 people. While you will primarily probably be RPing with your sigil the most, just by merit of where those bitches are all the time. And they're your like housemates. So there's, oh my God, they were roommates. There's drama there. But you will be interacting more with the server at large than you would if you're in like just in an RP guild that only ever RPs in their guild hall, because you're only going to see those people. Whereas, here there's more stuff in the open world. You have to be ready to pivot if people interact with the story, because if you're doing a major story beat in the middle of like Rustlock and someone comes across you, you cannot tell them to leave. It's rude as hell. Don't do that. If you are having a private scene, take it to your castle, because otherwise you cannot be mad at people for interrupting, because if you're in the open world, you're in the open world and people can come across and interact with it just as they would if you were arguing with your wife in the grocery store. So those are the 2 places that people come from the most often, which are great. They're good building blocks, but you gotta keep in mind that Shadows of Vardoran is a little different. So what about it is different? These are the things about it that stick out the most for me, is that it is both in-game RP and letters. So your character's going to be sending letters. So that's something to keep in mind is, how do you interact with getting letters? Do you respond? What's your character's writing style? What sort of voice do they use? And then there's also the in-game RP. People are, you're running around, you're talking in-game. What kind of magic does your character use? Does your character just use one blood type? Like my character, the last 2 seasons couldn't blood mend. I never used blood mend. I forget it's a thing because I didn't use it for 2.5 seasons. There's open world and there's hub RP. You're RPing, in the iron mine when you run into somebody. You're doing a materials run. You run into somebody you've never seen before and you're like, hey, and you talk to them. But then there's also like castle RP, or there will be faction hubs this season. So you'll also have like kind of like that bar-based, in-based, arena-based hub RP where you're RPing in a space and RPing around that space. But then, you'll also just like randomly run into people and RP with them. So it's both. With vampires specifically, and though I know we will be having humans, but, with vampires, there's only so many things that you can do. So I think that it's important to think about the tropes that you want to implement and whether or not they'll work realistically for a whole season. And I will talk about tropes again a little later. And And then you got to find that balance between the gameplay and your in-character decisions. Like, if you have a character who is like William did a really good job of playing a character that was human, sympathetic, and working around that as somebody who was like, he like made them dorm rooms, and the cages were for their protection. They could lock themselves in. You know, there's ways to kind of like work around the game systems while still, you know, making them honest to your character. My biggest recommendation to new people is try to, and even old hats, is try to ungamify the game as much as you can. Try to make a production out of the little things. Like, if you're gonna go get mutant grease, like, make it an RP event. Like, take people with you, talk about it, you know, RP about the transcendum. Don't just go silently get mutant grease and then come home. Because, you know, like, you can, and we all do that sometimes, but it is generally more fun if you, like, think about RP first, game second. You know, like, it's fine if your character needs to go get mutant grease, but, you know, they can do other things while they're there. You can make it into an adventure rather than just a chore. It adds more to the game, you know, having V-Blood hunts be like a thing where you're like, hey, me? Yeah, no, I am recording. Hello. If I start getting robot, because sometimes that happens after I talk for like 30 minutes straight in Discord, let me know, and I will,
I will let you know.
I will yeet the meeting and reset it. So you're going to want to, you know, do things that, you know, kind of refresh that game loop. Like, my favorite thing with Nell last season was she didn't know who any of the V-Bloods were. And so I RP'd her reacting to them because she's like, I don't know who the fuck Quincy is. Who's this man? Why is he throwing things at me? This is really rude. You know, refreshing that. Because even though you've played the same, you know, V-Blood fight 900 times, your character probably hasn't. So, you know, taking that fresh approach to things in the game loop can help make things feel a little less brain dead. And then you got to remember the pacing with your character. So this current season is going to be about 3 months. We're going to take a break, and then we'll have another season of 3 months that's like on the same lore. And then we're going to do another wipe. We're only doing 2 seasons in a row this time. So if you're planning to have, like, if you're planning to play the same character 2 seasons in a row, and you know what arc you want for them, you got to remember that we're going to be here for 3 months. Because we do see people every season that get through their entire planned arc in 3 weeks, and then they don't know what to do. You got to stretch it out. You got to leave yourself out to have your character, like, be malleable, be flexible, have your character get changed by the people around them. Because at the end of the day, if you take anything away from this workshop, it's that your character, if you want to get good RP, you need to be interactable, and you need to be collaborative. You need to leave room for other players in your story, and you need to provide your fellow player with hooks. So keep all this in mind while we're moving on. So I also wanted to touch on low magic, because it's been a while since we've done a low magic setting. So low magic is my favorite, personally, because it gives you an infinite well to grow from. Because if you're coming in with a character that has already finished everything, let's say like they're all Hark. They've finished the arc. They are the most infamous void sorcerer in the world, which is great because people come to him for advice. But Alharic himself doesn't have a lot of room for magical growth. He's got room for personal growth. He could become a dad to William. But as far as like career, the man is done. He's peaked. Yeah, there's always personal growth. But now low magic is the opportunity for every character to have like physical and magical growth on top of that character growth. Nobody's coming in at like, you know, the apotheosis. Nobody's peaked. Nobody is God in a sheep's clothing. So it gives you more room to like play with how you want your character to grow. Because, you know, while we all love a tired old man, you know, stereotype, like, you know, we all love the Dashghouls of the world and the Alharics of the world. You know, low magic is a unique opportunity for everyone to really have a heavy arc that is growth development. Because, you know, your character is going to be starting from low magic. Like, even if they're like, they have like theoretical professional experience and they're like, you know, they know a lot about magic, there's going to be a limit on what you can do with that magic because we are doing a low magic season. And when you're building your character, you have to keep that in mind. Like, we allow possession. You can have one entity that's possessing you, and you have to disclose who that entity is in your whitelist. If you want to be possessed by a god, we're going to tell you no for low magic, because that's too high of magic to have a deity sitting on your shoulder. You can be possessed by some guy, maybe a lich, but not, a god, or like the eldritch vampire Jesus. You gotta tone it down. You gotta dial it back, because we're doing low magic. If anyone has questions about you have an idea and you're like, I don't know if this is low magic, just open a ticket. We're happy to workshop with people, because my first season, I had a character concept, and it got approved in a whitelist, and then I got told halfway through the season that it didn't work for low magic, what I wanted to do. So I was like, okay. But, the admins were willing to workshop with me. And so I changed gears, I went a different direction, and it all worked out. And I like what we ended up coming up with better than my original idea. So it's fine. We're happy to workshop with you. But it can be daunting and sad to be told you need to adjust mid-season. So if you have any questions, please open a ticket and we will help you. We will help you. We will write with you. Yes, just ask. Nobody's going to bite. We're never going to be mean about it. We want to help. We want to make sure that you are writing within the confines of the season, because then everyone will have a better time. It sucks to have to tell people to change gears mid-season. So, if you have questions pre-season, please open a ticket. If you have questions after this, at the end of the, if you have a couple of things that you want to ask, hey, is this low magic? I'm happy to take those questions here. I might have to be like, let me get back to you, because I am not the entire RP overview team. And unless it's very, very clear lines in the sand, I might have to be like, let me ask the team and get back to you. Open a ticket. So please consider low magic. It's very important that you're building for the season. You're building for the magical mystery. If you have questions about how the magical mystery manifests in Frankelberg, where you are from, please open a ticket. Obviously include that in your whitelist, so we can be like, hey, this doesn't quite work with what the answer to the puzzle is. We need you to adjust to 2%. I don't think that'll happen to anyone, but just in case, please tell us what you're planning there. So one place that I like to kind of loosely start with is playlists and mood boards. This is where I start, but it is not where I spend most of my time. I slap together mood boards in probably 30 minutes or less, and then I work on playlists over the course of the season. I do limit myself to 8 tracks, because I think that really makes me think about and ruminate on the songs. But that's just me. That's my process. You can have a playlist of 50 songs. I don't care. I'm not you. I'm not your mom. So these are the playlists for my last 2 characters and my current character, which is not done. But she do be girl boss, be killin'. Mommy, yeah. Yeah. I like to start with mood boards and playlists, just to kind of get a good jumping off point, my vibe check for myself. Another cool thing that you can do is tables. So famously, my character from season 6 and season 7, when I was building her, I rolled a random fear generator. And I always like to give my characters 2 things, fears, and things that they hate that can be changed, and 1 thing that is indomitable. They will not change. They will not shift. They will not be adjusted. Because I think it's important for my characters to have convictions. And for Memoria, I rolled a fear of horses. And you may be thinking to yourself, but Naku, there are so many horses in game. Horses are quite detrimental to getting around the map fast. You need to ride a horse. To which I say, yes. Yes, you do. So my character's horse quirk ended up being important, because she hated the horsemen in season 7, a whole season after she was created, just on the merit that they used horse iconography. She absolutely refused to engage with them because she fucking hated horses. I would also kill horses outside of the bar. So if I walked outside and there was horses, I would roll a d20, and if I got a 7 or less, I would kill all of the vampirically bound horses outside. And a couple people walked out on me murdering their horses a couple of times, and then I would run away. But I would just murder people's horses. So if your vampire horse ever mysteriously died outside of an arena, it was probably me. Because fuck horses. So yeah, I like to give my characters traits from random generators. It's kind of the way that I start. Scarlet is going to hate frogs, because that's what I rolled for her. So when I'm in the cursed forest and she sees frogs, she's going to lose her mind, because she hates she hates frogs. So, if anyone has frog iconography, know that you're going to get hated on just as much as Memoria hated the horsemen. I think that if you don't know where to start, relying on tables and like those random generators for like quirks add a lot of depth to a character. Because like I was not expecting her hating horses to end up being her having beef with a cult a season later. So, you know, giving yourself and your character these quirks and then really sticking to them, I think is a great tool for anyone to use. If you transform into a frog, I will kill you. Thank you, Tony. And then getting into the meat of it, these are what I consider to be the 6 core elements that make a good player character. If you are overwhelmed by this, choose one. So all of your elements are married. They all interact with each other, but primarily your personality will affect your interactability, your backstory will affect your plot and your pacing, and your quirks are going to affect your hooks. So those are the 3 things that are kind of, directly tied, but they're all interacted. You might have the quirks that you have because of the backstory that you have. Your personality will also be informed by your backstory. Everything is related, but this is how I like to think about it when I'm building my character. So moving on, and you've got your internal and your external. Here's your internal. So your internal is going to be your character's personality, which is their manner of speaking, physical cues, flaws and strengths, likes and dislikes, fears, the Vetla of it all. Vetla's the example I will be using for personality, and, kind of the example of who does this well. So Vetla last season was the spirit of the North Star trapped in the body of a kindred. So Vetla, if you would tell Vetla, hey, we need to go north, Vetla would say, north is here, because Vetla was the North Star. Vetla also ran around as a bear the entire season. It took us until probably 2 months in to get Vetla bound to a horse. Not Fist of the North Star. So Vetla ran around, Craft fully committed to the bit, and Vetla didn't have a horse for 2 months. We lost 4 different perfect horses to Gloomrot lasers and paladins and stuff because Vetla just couldn't figure out how to vampirically bind their horse. Sticking to the personality of it all, having it was new bear because it was not a horse, it was a bear. You have to lean into those caricatures, because I think that the more that you do to make your character sound different from you, the more convincing of a character they will be. I always give my character an accent just because I feel like it helps separate people from my character, because when you hear me talking here in my normal voice, this is not what I'm going to sound like in game, and I think that helps kind of make my character into their own person rather than just being like, oh, that's Naku's talking to me. I always use Maveth as the example here. I think Maveth has a very, very, very particular way of speaking, where it comes out in even her letters. She, there's nothing quite like getting hit with a Maveth horse first thing in the morning, where you haven't had coffee and there's a horse in your living room, because the way that she sends bats is so involved and so particular to her. Nobody is doing it the same way that she is. So her letters are oh, that's a Maveth letter. It's very particular. It's very memorable, with the little ways that your character's personality comes through. Obviously, I think giving your characters flaws and strengths, likes and dislikes are really important because they just makes them feel more alive. Having your character be yeah, I fucking hate brute blood. I only drink Scholar. If you give me something other than Scholar, I'm gonna throw a tantrum about it. There's little things that you can do that I think, make your character feel more like an actual person rather than a 2D cutout. Because we all have things that we like, things that we don't like. Even if you need to have a notebook handy to write down those things as you come up with them, so quick, refresher before you log in for the day. Oh yeah, this bitch hates frogs, doesn't like brute blood. To make it seem like they're their own person, I think just goes a long way in making characters feel real. There's also your backstory. Your backstory, the 100% of the elements of your backstory will never be exposed to the public at large. There's always going to be things from your backstory that you, 1, make up on the fly, and 2, just never come up in conversation. It happens to all of us. You plan to have a story beat around a backstory thing, and maybe it just doesn't happen. It just becomes irrelevant. You decide to change gears. But I think that a well-written backstory should really inform your character's personality and really inform everything about them. If you have a character like Nell, who I will be deconstructing at the end of this as my example, she's been a very intense conservative religious culture where like everyone is very like prude. People don't kiss in public. It's like hand holding is the most that you do, and even then that's only with your spouse. Like people are very, very particular about the way that they do things. And so as somebody who came from that sort of culture, if people make out in front of her, Nell will scream. She will be like, this is a crime, I'm calling the police. So, you know, your backstory should inform your personality. There should be a reason why your character acts the way that they do. And so I think having a really robust backstory is important. You know, and I think that the most important thing I put little stars by the things that I think are the most important. I think your wants and goals are the most important. Your wants being your short term, like I want to fill up the iron storage. I am going to go to the iron mine. And then you go to the iron mine. And congratulations, you filled that want. I want to find a pureblood scholar, so I'm going to run around in vain in Dunley Monastery for 19 hours and then cry when I accidentally kill a perfect one on the road. You fulfill that want. And then your goals are like your season long or like month long goals of like, hey, I hate that bitch. I'm gonna challenge her to a war bat and I'm gonna kill her ass. That's a goal. It's, you know, it's more of like the long term. And I think that finding a balance between giving your characters lots of short-term wants for the day or the week of RP with those month-long or season-long or even arc-long goals is really important. Because if you have a character that has no goals and they're just kind of like vibing, they're going to be a little boring because they don't want anything. You know, there's no reason for you to reach out to other characters if you're, you know, if you know your character doesn't need anything. You know, your character's not going to hire people if your character doesn't need anything. You know, your character needs to be more than the game loop. You need to give them things that they want. And then there's your quirks. So your quirks are the things that are like weird. So like if someone sees you once, what do you want them to remember? Like what is the weird thing about your character that separates you from every other Joe Schmo here? You know, what are you known for? I think that jobs are a fantastic way to make your character memorable. If your character's like, yeah, hi, I'm Amoria, I'm a flesh crafter. Shake hands. She's a flesh crafter. People that I talked to once in season 7 would come up to me and be like, hey, I need a flesh crafter. I remember that you're a flesh crafter. So that provided me a lot of RP because I gave her one job and then I advertised that job. And so people came to her for it. You know, or Memoria and Nell both read fortunes. I would pull tarot cards for people and, you know, send them a picture of their reading and go over their reading in character. And so because of that, people would be like, yeah, I don't know what to do in my life. Will you give me a reading? And so people came to both of my characters for readings, which I thought was really fun. So giving your character things that they can offer to other players, whether that is expertise or a skill, I think is very important because it will generate URP. And then there's like the weirder side of quirks, which is like the Dashghoul groan, where like if you say something stupid Dashghoul and then it goes ugh, and leaves the room while groaning. Everyone remembers it. That's the first interaction I ever had with Dashghoul was sitting in dusk and hearing him do it from a distance. So like having those like little character quirks is really important. You know, like what is like the thing that your character repeats all the time? Like Nell's was going, She had a very particular, and it spread, and then everyone in my sigil started doing it, and then when people would hang out with us, they would do the too, because I did it in a very specific cadence. You know, so yeah, you gotta give yourself little quirkiness, little, you know, isms in their speech pattern that people remember. You know, how does your character react to being attacked? Do they attack back? Do they shut down? Do they get quiet? Do they run away? You know, there's lots of little things that you can give your character, again, to make them feel more like a real person. Most of the internal stuff is how to make your character more three-dimensional. It's how to evolve them from a paper cutout into a real person. So moving on to the external, these are the ways that those sort of internal decisions manifest when you're interacting with other players. So like for interactability, what do you give in a conversation? And I will talk more about those kind of tropes that I mentioned earlier. So if you are playing like a lone wolf, like Geralt of Rivia type character who broods in a corner and sits in silence at the bar, I promise you are not going to get a lot of RP because you are going to be sitting in silence in a corner at a bar and not talking to anyone. And if someone comes up to you and talks to you and you say, fuck off, don't talk to me, they're going to be like, okay, and they're going to leave. Unless you, like, you know, and you still might get RP. There might be somebody who's like, oh, why are you so grumpy, old man? And then they have a conversation with you. But if you constantly push back against people interacting with you with your character, you're not going to get as much RP as a character who gives as much as they get. Because if you're coming from like kind of like that broody character archetype, especially if you don't have a set sigil who's going to just drag you along with everything everywhere you go, becoming kind of like the grumpy group dad is kind of a way of getting around that, because you have character that drag you along with them everywhere and sort of force this broody character to have RP. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you have to do it well. You need to have friends. Because if you are broody, don't talk to anyone, nobody's going to talk to you. And it's not the responsibility of your fellow player to talk to you. If you are a character that is unfun to RP with, people won't RP with you. And I know that sounds blunt, but that is the truth. You are going to give as much as you get. If you are constantly a scene sealer, or you don't contribute anything to a scene, or if your character is a Mary Sue and has 10,000 jobs, nobody's going to think of you in a time of crisis. They're not going to be like, you know who we need here? The guy who's an asshole and unhelpful. That's not who they're going to call in a time of crisis. If they're having issues with void magic, they're going to, like, Alharic was an asshole, but Alharic was an asshole who was the excellence in his field. And so if people were having void issues, even though Alharic was an asshole, because he was a helpful asshole, people would be like, hey, Alharic, we need help. The void is being weird. Please, Grandpa, guide us. So there's ways to do kind of like the balance there, where you can play somebody that's an asshole, but still helpful. Yeah, you can be snarky as fuck, but still helpful. You know, like Memoria was not the kindest. She was very much like very religious, very judgmental, hated most people. But if you asked her for help, she would say yes, because she valued helping her fellow kindred. And so if you're like, yeah, we need a flesh crafter, Memoria would be there. Memoria wouldn't charge you for it in time of crisis. Like the day that there was like Mortium sieges on people's castles and I had to run around and flesh craft like 6 different people in an afternoon, Memoria didn't charge any of those people, because she's like, we're getting attacked. This is war. I am going to, you know, buckle down, fix people, and then move on to the next one. And so you need to kind of sell yourself. You need to give people a reason to interact with you. You need to provide those hooks. And I'm kind of talking about interactability and hooks at the same time here. You know, because if your character is known for 30 things and then something obscure or niche or specific comes up, I promise you, you are not going to be the character they think of. You know, I always say, you know, give your character like 3 things that they're really good at, 4 things that they're passably good at, and then that's it. Just to have that be all. You know, because if you are too good at everything, nobody will think of you. They're going to go to the people. If you are having an issue with spirit magic, you're going to go to the person that's an expert in spirit magic. You're not going to go to the person that's an expert in everything. So limit your character's skills, makes those skills more marketable and better. I need to drink water. One moment. Yeah, and I really sent people to my house because he couldn't heal anyone, and he met Memoria like 3 times. But he still knew that she was a flesh crafter, so he sent people her way because I marketed her as a flesh crafter. With hooks, I think the most important thing to focus on is if you only meet someone once. Like, let's say, you know, you're in Central Time, there's someone that you've never met who's like Oceana. You see them once at a very early event on a Saturday. What do you want them to remember about your character? If you're like a flash in the pan, you only see each other's once, what is the thing that they're going to remember? And I'm going to read Alharic's comment out loud because I think that's really good. You can be a hermit character. You can be a character that pushes people away. You can be a character that is paranoid. But this is also a social space. Allow people to approach. Have that part worked out for your character, how he interacts with the people when approached. You know? Alharic knew the value of not having enemies, so he would be very stiff, formal, polite, but rarely told people to fuck off. If he was insulted by someone or people, he deliberately went out of their way to disrespect them. He'd refuse to assist that particular person, but he also gives leeway in certain situations. You know, you got to remember that all RP is a collaborative effort. And so if you're playing a stone wall that does not budge, never moves, never lets people in, you're not going to get anything. People are going to be like, that's a wall, and then move on, because there's nothing to gain from bashing their head into the wall. You know, and you got to be consistent. The other thing that I like to warn people about is if you do a very, very difficult voice for you to physically maintain, you are either going to hurt yourself or not maintain it. If you're speaking in an accent that you can't actually if a voice that hurts you to do, you can't RP for 5 hours in that voice. Please don't hurt yourselves. Please don't make a character decision that you can't stick to. It's okay to like start with a certain accent and then like get better at it as the season grows, you know, really like commit to the voice. But don't do something that's going to hurt you. Don't make decisions that you can't stick to, because it's going to be weird. If you were British for 2 months and you've decided you don't want to do that accent anymore, and then I meet your character for the first time in 2 months and you're not British anymore, just randomly. It's like, he's been British for 2 months. Why is he talking like that? I'm going to assume that you're possessed. You know, so you can't make those, like, you can't change those character presentation decisions without people noticing, you know? So that's, you know, that's something to consider. You know, like if I was sick, I switched to text RP because I don't want my character to sound like a frog, unless I want to also make her sick. You know, it's you gotta commit to the bit. You know, don't commit to a bit that you can't commit to. Also, don't do things that are too. You know, there's a line between being quirky and being annoying and being scene steely. So it's also something to keep in mind. If your character is the worst, people are going to avoid you. That's just how it is. You know, and if you're using, please, for the love of God, if you're like, hey, I want to use a voice changer, please open a ticket so we can pull you to Admin Island and workshop it with you, because I promise you there are people that are going to sound like Bane going through an air filter that is crunchitized to 1,000, like, and you're not going to know what they say. And then people are going to be like, I'm sorry, sir, I cannot understand you. Do not be bit crushed Bane. Please, if you're working with a voice changer, especially with the way that the stupid V-Rising like voice stuff is, please just open a ticket. Please just let us workshop it with you on Admin Island. Because, oh my God, if you sound crunchy and nobody can understand you, nobody's gonna RP with you. If you're trying to have a character moment, it's gonna fall flat if people are like, I'm so sorry, I know that you're in crisis, but I can't understand you. And then you have to repeat something that's like an important character moment. Yeah, it's gonna be rough. So yeah, please workshop your character voices. Moving on to your plot and your pacing, because this is such a collaborative and an interactive space, please hold gently. I'm going to use Lenora and Angelo as the example for this from season 7. Lenora had her throat ripped and rolled like 3 1s. And so Lenora's player was like, oh no, she needs to perma. I rolled 3 1s on this throat rip. But people were really upset about Lenora dying. And so her character, Bitter Thorn, was like, I'm going to make it so that 3 nat 20s can heal Lenora. But you can only try a method of healing her once. So basically the entire community pooled around her and Angelo, who had their life forces tied. So if Lenora died, Angelo was going to die too. To find ways to fix them. And if you rolled a nat 20 during your ritual or your method or whatever, that would be 1 back in the bin and get them a little further away from death. But if, they died, it would add to the death counter. So they had to be very careful, but they're, really playing with that idea of morality. And Bitter Thorn really went into the season with like, this happened, Lenora's going to die. But because people worked so hard and rallied around them and tried so many different things and they got those nat 20s, those characters did not perma. They got their happily ever end, they got their happy ending. They got their happily ever after. I think that there's a lot to be said for holding gently because like, I'm going to use injury RP as an example. So let's say your character, you're in a fight with a Luminance Paladin. It's like a, major story beat. Your character gets really badly burned. If you come to the Flesh Crafter and have them waste 2 hours of their time trying to flesh craft you better, and then at the end of that RP that ostensibly went really well, and say, no, sorry, I'm still not healed. That sucks for the other person because they're going to feel like they put all this time and effort into the scene that had no payoff. Your character isn't any better. So it can be difficult. You need to be careful when you're approaching specifically lingering wounds because there's a way, if you were too stubborn with your wounds, it will become a frustration for your fellow player. You need to leave that wound open to be fixed, or you need to be very, very, very clear from the onset, out of character. Hey, just so you know, I want this to be like a mortal wound. I'm going to perma this character. You need to RP that your character can't fix it. There's a difference between doing that, having that communication, and just in the scene being like, no, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, because that's just an exercise in frustration for your fellow player. So if you're going to hold tight to something, you need to communicate that out of character. But I recommend not holding tightly, just in general. I think that leaving your character open to be malleable, to be changed by other player characters is the best RP you can do. So I'm going to use Hush as an example. My character from season 6 was on the lam, very, very untrusting, even of the people in her sigil. And she sort of accidentally tripped and fell her way into a friendship with Dashgul. And Dashgul is somebody that she didn't talk to for the first probably like month and a half of the season. Like we were in different factions. We were literally living on different sides of the map. And I never ran into him. But it just so happened that our characters had very compatible arcs. And so Dashgul was a character that was planned to be permit, and Hush was also a character that was planned to be permit. But because they were sort of slotted together in a really cool and interesting way, they were able to solve each other's issues, and so neither of us ended up permitting them. They ended up getting married in the desert during the 800-year time skip, because just their stories really, really worked with each other. And so because of that, Hush didn't perma. She came back as Memoria season 7, and Dashgul came back season 7. And so I think, even if you have like a tentative arc planned for your character, where like, yeah, this bitch is probably going to perma. If you meet people that change your perma conditions, if they change like fatalistically, like the whole arc you have planned for that character, I think it's phenomenal to just let it happen. It's good RP. And then it also, makes really, really cool RP for the other person. If they're like, yeah, my character has this very specific niche thing that is going to save this person from death. That's great. Your characters are like bound forever. And like Grump and I talk a lot about Dashgul and Memoria, Hush, because we made a really, really cool story where it feels like, and I feel like part of the reason why it worked so well is because we both allowed each other to really impact the other character's story. Dashgul would have permaed if he didn't meet Hush. That's great. That makes me feel really cool that I changed the planned course of a character together with, my bestie here, because the RP was so good that it just organically went into a different direction. So I think giving yourself that room for that, leaving yourself intentional holes is another really big thing of like, yeah, maybe your character is cursed. Maybe you don't know the one cure. Maybe that's something that you can organically come up with as your fellow RPer. Leave room for people to offer you solutions that you didn't think of when you were writing the story. I think that fundamentally is fucking huge. You should be focused on the journey and the bonds and like the relationships that you are forming with other characters first and foremost, rather than like I want to perma my character and have everybody cry at the end of the season. Because I promise you, people are going to remember the journeys, not the big dramatic end. The things that people go back and ruminate on and think about are those collaborative moments, those ways that they affected each other and really interacted with each other. Those are the things that we think on fondly, not, people who had, random permadeaths that felt kind of cheap because they didn't let anyone else, interact with them or save them. Not saying you can't perma a character. There's definitely room for it. It definitely has a place in making, fear RP and value of life RP feel more important and feel more, like daunting. But, there's ways to be malleable that will make your RP feel more valuable to the people around you. So we're going to do Build a Bitch with Nell this time. So I'm going to go over kind of like the 6 the 6 elements of a good player character with the decisions that I made for Nell. So Nell was super prude, super judgmental. She's from a very, very, very like insular culture. And so, if Nell sees you kiss somebody and then she sees you kiss somebody else, she's going to lose her mind about it. She's going to be like, you're committing a crime. Ugh. Yeah, literally insular. She was from an island. She was from a collection of islands, actually. And then the voice that I used for Nell was very, kind of nasally, younger sounding. I think I'm too tired to do it. But Nell was a little dumb. you know, like notably dumb. Like she just wouldn't get it. People would make puns or like sex jokes around her, and she just wouldn't get it. It would just whoosh right over her head. And so because of that, she kind of became this familiar archetype of like people thought she was a fledgling. They assumed that she was young. She was like 30, but she was very, for all intents and purposes, in a setting that was very like, oh, here's a clip. We can play a clip of uh did it pop up? Can you see it? Is it on?
Yep.
All I can say, lady, is that many women appreciate skilled fingers. Do with that as you will.
Wow, Sin's in my house. I invite you into my house, and this is how you repay me. You just say lecherous, dirty things. You come into my house and say lecherous, awful things that make me sin in the eyes.
That's okay. So Nell was a character that had a very, like, you can see clips of her being like, Leilani, there's a pervert in the front yard. Like, she had a very particular way of speaking that, you know, you would hear her talk and kind of know who she was. She's this young, naive, very inexperienced with real world matters. You know, but she's earnest. She was honest. She was very, you know, like, you'd meet her once, be nice to her once, and she'd be like, we're best friends. This is my best friend. We've only known each other for a little bit, but this is my best friend. You know, she was very quick to warm up to people. She was also vengeful. Her culture is very totalistic. If you commit a crime, you're getting killed for it. And so because of that, like when Sadie ripped Creature's throat, she's like, yeah, we're going to kill Sadie about it. I'm going to have Peanut kill Sadie. And then she did that. She had Peanut kill Sadie because she's very, very vengeful, very, very grudge holding, because that's just the sort of culture she came from. That's her personality. She's not used to being told no. And so when I went through the gauntlet for the Horseman with Boris, and Boris was the person that got in, because if you went through the gauntlet for the Horseman with a partner, only one person got in. Nell had never been told no before. Nell had never been rejected from anything before. You know, her parents are very into the cult that she was raised in. And so she was always included because her parents were, you know, the ideal in their culture. And so Nell had never been told no from a space before. Nell had never been rejected before. And so she took that very, very, very personally, where she hated the Horsemen after that. And she liked horses. But she was like, fuck the Horsemen. The Horsemen won't let me into their club. They're mean. I don't like them. And so Nell took that rejection very, very personally because she had no experience with that. She was very young. And so, you know, that ended up being a big character for her, with how does this character that's never been told no before react to being told no in a very big way. You know, she's Nell. And then, you know, with her backstory, she's from a very intense culture. And so she's very intense. You know, Nell thought at the start of the season that polyamory was a crime, because that's a crime where she's from. People are aggressively monogamous. People court and then get married. There is no dating. And so because of that, she was very set in her convictions of like, no, you're just wrong. There's no goddesses here. So you're just, you know, you're going to burn in the afterlife. You know, she's just very set in her ways, but she was swayable. If people took the time to like have like conversations with her and kind of like logically explain things, or explain that, hey, it's illegal where you're from, it's not illegal here, then she could, you know, she could grow. Like by the end of the season, she was more of the mind of like, polyamory, not illegal in Vardoran, but it's still illegal in my heart. That was where she ended up. But there was a chance that I made it so Nell could be completely changed. Like if two people had tried to romance her and been like, no, it's okay, we can all be dating at the same time, Nell could have ended up in a polyamorous relationship. But because that never happened, she ended up being like, it's illegal in my heart. You may not be getting smited here, but it is illegal to me. I personally find that gross. So, you know, Nell was, you know, she's kind of suspicious of people, especially people that, you know, knew her parents. Nell's asexual. So Nell was not romanceable, but she wasn't fuckable, if that makes sense. Not that I don't ERP, but she would have been very, very difficult to romance, because you couldn't do anything physical with her in any capacity. But yeah, that's the distinction. Nell was a character that was asexual. And so part of what, and the other thing too about Nell is that nobody ever told her that asexuality was a thing. It was never brought up around her. And that was something that I had planned to be her arc, is like, because I was like, I'm sure I'll meet somebody who's ace or mentions that as being a possibility to Nell, and she'll be like, oh, that's me. Maybe people aren't revolting. Maybe it's just not for me. But that never happened. Nobody ever brought up asexuality around her. And so she still is under the impression to this day that people are just nasty, because she never realized it was like a her thing. Yeah. And so she just nobody ever had that conversation with her. It never came up. So that's like a good example of something that I planned for her, that just because it never came up with other character, it just never happened. Yeah. Yeah. So Nell was just very ace. Which is part of like led into her produce. She exists in my heart, Sunbro. How dare you? So Nell was, she's very ace. She'd have been very difficult to romance, but I always leave open the possibility for everything. Nell wanted to be famous, so Nell would do things that, like, people would be like, yeah, go commit a crime, and she'd be like, yeah, I've been hired for a quest. The quest is murder, but I've been hired for a quest. Like the day that the Ruthven siege was happening, if people had tried to stop the gang that was gonna destroy the Castle Heart from destroying the Castle Heart, like if any player characters had sided with Ruthven, Nell was gonna kill on sight. She's gonna go attack them about it. She's gonna murder people about it. I definitely throat ripped somebody outside and then immediately ran away. Where I was just like, hello, how does it feel to be a loser? And then I ripped their throat and kept walking. So, Nell is she's got a very strong sense of justice. She's got a very, she's got a desire to be an adventurer, to be a guild master, to, make her team, her super awesome lucky team, the coolest people in the world. And so she'd, make a lot of like really weird decisions just to be famous, to be cool. Yeah, she had ambition. But those are things that people interacted with. People could hire her team. People could have those weird conversations with her about me holding hands with my actual fiance is not a crime, actually, no. But you could have those talks with her. Her quirks were screaming, that's illegal, to the point where I did the Kirby's calling the police meme, but with Nell, because Nell was gonna call the police on you. You're all disgusting degenerates, and she thinks that's a crime. Nell was super impatient. She would get a rash if she sat in meetings for too long, and so I had a timer on my phone, and if you ever made me sit somewhere for more than 15 minutes, I would start getting up and pacing, and then if 30 minutes went by, she would start, like, literally clawing at the walls to get out. She'd be like, I can't be here! Like, I joined a Sneeple meeting in the middle once, and I kept running around, and Noctis was like, please sit down. And I was like, no, I will not sit down, because Nell was having a moment with running around. Nell had the super awesome lucky team. She had her team. That was her job. People would hire us to do things. We advertised. She talked about her super awesome lucky team. She sang their theme song on the road. So it's very like obvious of like who she is, what she's doing, how you can interact with her. You can hire her, you can kiss in front of her, and she'll scream like a pterodactyl. I can't do it because I've been talking too much and my mouth is dry. But the Nell became iconic, and then Vetla started doing it, and then Peanut started doing it, and then Boris started doing it, and then there was no escape. Yeah, don't be afraid to be really obvious. You can just, 911, hello, 911, they're holding hands. You can, there's ways to give yourself, quirkiness. I think Nell was a very plot light character. I really leaned into her like emotional growth rather than her like having issues. So Nell was I leaned really heavily into the quirks. She had a very particular way of being, a lot of weird habits. She would eat her hair if she was upset. She cut her own hair, so it was always like a disaster. But Nell was just a character of all time. So that's just kind of, where I was with Nell. So that's this workshop. I loved Nell too. Nell was fun. She was a quirky little kid. And that's pretty much it. Even if you only take one thing out of this, one thing that you add to your own personal character creation, that's a victory from me. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments? Does anyone have any things they'd like to share with the class?
We have 2 people that want to get on stage.
Bet. Bring them bitches on stage.
First one coming up.
Well, I will answer Ev's question after this. Hello, penguins.
Hello. This is sort of a for anyone out there who is a excuse me, my mic went weird for a moment there. I don't know what happened. For anyone who is a guy, gal, or non-binary pal trans person, because I am as well, and we mentioned voice earlier, and how I know that there are a lot of people who are in my situation who are maybe afraid to speak because maybe they just started their journey and their voice isn't quite there yet, and or they're just, or maybe they came from another server where they were mocked for it or something. Most of these people, I'm new to Shadows of Vardoran, but most of these people that I have had here, I have RP'd with before, and they have always been wonderful. So never be afraid. If you can maybe tell I stammer as well, I've never been made fun of for it. It's So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there's despite some fears that and despite some people say it's like, yeah, it's a safe place. I know that there's a lot of people who sort of kind of buckle because their voice might not match the character that I've never had a problem with it with these people. If there's any points that someone does have with it, I've always had the admins have my back whenever I've had an issue with someone who would maybe mock my voice or something. So yeah,
If anyone makes fun of anyone's voice, I'll literally kill you. So just know that.
Yeah. I just wanted to put that out because I know I can feminize my voice now. I've been practicing. I'm not doing it now, obviously, but I've been practicing it for years, and some people, they have trouble. Maybe they're not on the right stuff yet because their particular place of living isn't as accepting as where I am from, and and such, and they feel self-conscious about. I know I did when I first started. In fact, it was this server that encouraged me to practice my voice a lot more, and that's how I was able to kind of feminize my voice a lot more when I'm not speaking a mile a minute. I'm trying to just get everything out so I don't stay up here all day. Uh, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
I-
Get yeeted.
Okay, and then I did it. Thank you. Yeah, that's important to keep in mind. And if anyone ever is an asshole about your voice, open a ticket, because obviously that's not okay. Occasionally, like if you accidentally misgender someone, just don't do it again. learn from your, to be corrected. Don't be an asshole. And then, yeah, voice mods are great if you want to, if you're just like a cis person trying to play someone of the opposite sex, just make sure you're checking in, making sure that it works, that you don't sound like a robot. Don't be crunchitized Bane. I did want to answer Ev's question of how do you strike a balance between having visible, noticeable quirks and not scene stealing? I think that this comes down to always keep in mind time and place. So there was a meeting with the Sneeple at oh wow, at their triangle. I'm forgetting the word for it. About planning the siege. Yeah, the ziggurat. Thank you. There was a meeting at the ziggurat. Thank you, all 10 of you, for the Ruthven siege. And Nell is somebody who hates meetings. She gets itchy and she gets really uncomfortable and she doesn't like sitting still. So I would have Nell pop out of her chair and kind of like pace a little bit, and then I'd sit back down. But I didn't do it in a way that was scene stealy. Like when they were talking about a very serious conversation, I let the scene be serious. I didn't have Nell freak out. Once the meeting had petered off into an ending, then she was literally clawing at the door, like, let me out. because the meeting was over. So I still let her express her quirk, and then she had hives for like 2 days after the meeting. She sat still for too long, because she's literally allergic to meetings. Because I was not doing meetings last season. I didn't want to. So, there's a way to like kind of like table your quirks for a second for the sake of the RP. Like if someone's in like a dire, very serious, like a character is dying or having a major character arc moment, I'm not going to steal that by having it be about Nell not being able to sit still, because that's rude. So, your character's quirks should never exist at the detriment of another player's moment. If you ever stomp on somebody else's important emotional story beat because of a quirk, that's bad RP, bud. Eris asked about advice earlier for an antagonistic character, which I'll also touch on pretty briefly, and then I'll take another hand. I think that there are ways to do antagonists well, and I think that a big part of that is avoiding mustache twirling. One of the things that I always mention when people tell me they want to build an antagonistic character is say, look at your character objectively and ask and tell me, are you actually playing Littlefinger or are you actually playing Jafar? Because a lot of people will try to be antagonists and they're like, yeah, I'm suave and manipulative, and then they're the most transparently evil mustache twirling son of a bitch you've ever met. And people approach them as though they are the most transparently evil mustache twirling son of a bitch you've ever met. So, you have to keep that in mind. Because if you're playing somebody that is transparently villainous, people are going to treat you like you're transparently villainous. You also have to be ready to get pushback. If you kill somebody's friends, they're gonna come get ya. You gotta be ready for like the turnabout. I think that I've meant more playing characters who are unlikable but engaging. I think that it's balance. Even if your character is unlikable, they have to be fun to RP with, which I think is something that's very, very hard to do. To play somebody who fucking sucks, but it's still fun to RP with. I'm sorry I've been picking on Alharic a lot, but I think that Alharic is a good example of someone who kind of sucks. Like, he's just mean to people. My character sent him a letter and he called her an idiot, but it was a really funny letter, and I loved that he called her an idiot. It was fucking funny, So there's ways to be an asshole, but be an asshole in a way that's funny out of character. Like Memoria was a bitch. She was a bitch. I'd close the door on people and be like, I fucking hate that guy. While they were out of character, definitely still in earshot. There's ways to be mean without being without sucking. The big thing about it is that, like Vespertine said here, if you're an asshole, but you're still a collaborative and interactive asshole, that goes leagues and bounds. If your character still has hooks, still has reasons to talk to people, still has reasons to, work together, yeah, be fun to hate. I think Greg did a really good job of that last season, where, when Greg was a turncoat for Ruthven, it was so fun to have Nell, who had been his number one stan the entire season, be like, Greg fucking killed Peanut, I'ma kill his ass. That was fun. Like, the payoff of being like, oh, Greg's evil now? Fuck that guy. Because it was fun to hate him in that moment. It was fun for him to be on the Talos porch and talk shit at him from the safety of the fence because he couldn't get up the stairs. There's ways to be an asshole but still be an interactable asshole. Yeah. So villains are definitely a balancing act, but you still have to be something that people can talk to, because if you're a brick wall, you're not going to get anything out. Let's bring Ruby up onto stage here. Hello, come here. What can I do for you?
Hello. I want to
Whoops.
talk
Sorry,
a
Palenso, you can come
little.
up next.
Yeah, I think Palencia was first, but I'll try to make this quick. I wanted to talk about, on the one hand, Naku brought up, hey, you don't want to rush character arcs. I want to talk about, using that exact advice, how it kind of got me into trouble last season. In that, sort of tying in with the lingering wounds idea of, let people have an effect on your character's wounds. Otherwise, they're going to get burned out and annoyed because they feel like they don't know what they're doing. or they don't know what to do. I definitely overdid it with the Blood Moon shenanigans last season that Alyssa was going through. Because, like, at the end of season 7, Alyssa got sick with Dracula blood, and then I decided going into this season, okay, she has a Dracula blood addiction, and the reason every time on a blood moon she goes out of her mind is because she can smell Dracula blood and really wants it, but doesn't actually realize that. What does she do? Um, and that led her to do a lot of bad things. Um, Problem I ran into was people would try to do things to help with this. And I wasn't really letting them work that much because I wanted to like drag out the story arc. And in hindsight, it would have been better to either communicate more out of character, or tone down things, or have more progressive improvements. And there was like a particular ritual that happened with a couple of people that I'm not going to get into that in hindsight would have been good to have a chat with them out of character in the middle and be like, hey guys, so just so you know, this is gonna backfire horribly. Um, if you go on the current path, do you want to proceed? Um, and so like at some point, like like moderation and like out of character stepping in as opposed to kind of letting things happen would have been beneficial. So drag your story arcs out. Don't tell your whole story in 3 weeks because you got 3 to 6 months to do it. But at the same time, definitely, give and take.
For
A lot of
sure.
give and take.
I definitely think that there's something to be said, cautionary for blood moons in general. That blood moons occur too often in game, in my opinion, to be used as a good story beat. Because if you are like, Alyssa, she went out of her mind whenever there's a blood moon. If we RP'd all day, we'd see like 3 or 4 blood moons in one day. That RP of her, running away, going to go fight Dracula is very repetitive if it happens that often. Not to pick on you, but
No,
there are people every season who are like blood moon frenzy every single time there's a blood moon. And as somebody who's been like neighbors with a character, I will tell you, saving somebody from frenzy is fun once. After that, I don't want to do it again.
Yeah. Like for instance, different server. Like to very briefly bring like Redem into this, blood moons are like a once a month occasion. If it's a once a month thing and it has a really serious effect, then like yeah, that's good. But if it's every day, then it's like okay, come on.
Yep. So it's something important to keep in mind. All right, I'm gonna yeet you back into the audience. Goodbye. All right, Palanzu. Whenever time I see your name, I think like Pantsu. I don't know why.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much. I have another question, but I want to kind of expand on the idea of villainous characters a bit and your interpretation of villainous characters, right? You like we all agreed that it should be fun. It has to have hooks for other players to engage with. It shouldn't basically be a pain in the ass for other players, right? But what are the boundaries in this universe that villainous characters can push? Can you give us some examples on this? Because one example for that is we will have humans as a race, right? So vampires can just kill any human just because they're human, basically. That's a villainous act. But how should it be? Or any other example that resonates on a similar level? Thank you.
I mean, I think that especially with human vampire RP, we are workshopping a way to have it so if you initiate a perma attempt on a human and you lose that fight, there will be drawbacks for you as a character, like forced punishment, just to stop people from basically being like, yeah, I'm just gonna go kill all the people that are playing humans, because that's not fun. You're not giving people a chance to explore that. So be cautious. I'm not gonna get into it right now because we don't have the specifics on like what that will look like, but just be aware that's something in the pipeline. I think with villainy, the most important thing to remember at all times is, am I doing this to take joy in the plight of other people, or am I doing this because I think it will lead to good RP? If the answer is ever the prior, you're doing it wrong. If you are being a villain just because you like to shit on other people's days, you like to make people unhappy, you like to see people in anguish, go play on a real PvP server. Go steal somebody's things. You should always be RPing an antagonist with the intention of pushing a character to growth, pushing a character to change, pushing a character to have a reaction. If you're doing villain RP for any other reason, it just kind of is very one note and it sucks. You need to make sure that your villain is a person. Again, with like the mustache twirling, Jafars are not fun to RP with. Someone who's so evil, constantly doing evil things. It's very one note. It's very repetitive, and people will go out of their way to avoid you. You're gonna make your own RP suffer if you play a one note villain. If you're like, yeah, I want to play a villain, I want to suck. People are gonna be like, that guy sucks, and they're not gonna invite you to meetings. They're gonna tell you can't come to their party. You know, you're gonna get a lot of pushback. I always say that if you want to play a villain and you want to have fun, you need to have friends. Like the charlatans had a great time RPing with each other. They were very unpopular on like the server level, but the charlatans still had friends. They were all people with things going on, with dynamics between them. They were fun to hang out with. Make your arrogant bastard have some insecurities. Make your arrogant bastard have flaws. Give them friends. Give them people that they don't hate, that they aren't an antagonist to. Because if you're an antagonist to everyone, you are going to be alone immediately. And you are not going to get RP. Because if everyone hates you, you're only going to get, hateful RP back.
This is great because I'm asking this because my first character, Pal, was a journalist, right? And at one point I thought of basically spreading rumors or publishing other characters' um, insecurities in the newspaper because my character was going through a kind of an evil um, stage, I could say, maybe. Like, I think you remember, I was going to write about Nell and her family. I was going to write about Peanut. I was going to write about so many other people because everything was happening out in the open anyway, right? In the waygates and something. And I hesitated because I was unsure, and that still sticks to my mind. Like, if I wanted to do it in this season, for example, I'm not, but what if? How should I have proceeded? And this actually is very helpful. Thanks so much, Nell. Yeet me.
I mean, I think with with antagonism in general, it's really important that you're keeping a constant stream of communication up with the person that you are antagonistically entangled with. Because if you're having like beef with somebody and they've taken it as out of character, I fucking hate this person beef, and you have not, you're going to run into issues. So you need to always be checking in. You need to be, keep a finger on the pulse to make sure that the antagonism is still fun for you. Because, if you blow up somebody's entire personal story and they get really pissed at you and they don't want to interact with you anymore, you've lost an RP thread, you've lost an RP contact, you've lost a potential out of character friend. But you want to make sure that it's fun for both people on this side of the equation. Because if you're having a great time being an asshole and the other person dreads seeing you, dreads interacting with you, then you need to just bury that plot line, because we're here to have fun. So if anyone's not having fun, you just need to let the butterfly go and do something else. That's just how it is. Sorry if that's this blunt, but we're here to have fun. Don't be a butthead. I'm gonna let not Alharic up on the stage.
Hi, I have been bullied all stream, so now I have something to say. No,
We love crunchy old man.
I think maybe some people are now currently also having an aneurysm because they actually hear my real voice for the first time. Actually, no, I played Felina in season 0, so yeah. Anyway, do you mind if I give some of my own thoughts
Yeah,
on the issue?
yeah,
People that may want
absolutely.
to play villains. Okay. So one thing that I consider very important for a character that is somewhat villainous is to keep in mind what is it that makes them a villain. Because villains do not consider themselves villains. They do not consider themselves evil. They consider whatever amoral bullshit thing that they are getting involved in to be a necessity for something else. And for things that do not interfere in their goal, they're just people. They're still just people. And to give an example in regards to, for instance, the human thing. You want to be antagonistic towards humans, for instance. Your character is vampire supremacist, or he's so old. Definitely not looking at my own character, Alharic here, but he's so old that he's just not able to care about humans at all anymore. What does that look like for your character? What does it look like that has people just take that moment's pause and be like, hold on, that shit ain't all right. To give an example for with William's little group of humans that he had in to protect with the Sanguine Covenant, there was one meeting that Alharic kind of tangentially touched upon us, and that he was present at the start of it before he was rightfully asked to leave. He was not a member of the Sanguine Covenant, and he would never ascribe to its ideals. But he did briefly end up meeting the leader of the humans under the Sanguine Covenant. And Alharic did not even acknowledge that person's presence. And when that human tried to talk to him, he, without looking at them, straight up said, I'm not talking to you. Because he does not consider humans to be worth his time anymore. He was somewhere around 6,500 years old. Humans, they're just there, according to him. He's too old. He does not see them as people anymore. They're either to a purpose or they're just there. That was his kind of evil with people. And then there was also a whole kinds of other things in relation to his paranoia and all kinds of good things. He was a very damaged individual because of those 6,500 years. But that was also, he was not a good person. And to some, he was the villain in their story. But I did not write him as a villain. I wrote him as a very flawed, very damaged, and very stiff and stuck in his own ways kind of character. And for some, he became a mentor. For others, he was someone they hated. And eventually, for one person that hated him, he became a father figure. And I would say, if you want to play a villain character, if you want to play an antagonist, decide for yourself what their personal motivations are. And what makes them a villain for what reason. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you for coming on the stage.
Yeah. Alrighty. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say, like to ask?
Yeet me.
Oh, you're here forever!
Yeet.
Let's
Someone
grab
else is on the
Nabs.
stage.
Come here.
Oh, hi. I'm Nabs. I'm new. I've like role played once, like via text before, but never in a large group like this. Quick yes or no. Are we allowed to like insert characters from our own world building or creative projects? And then I have a bigger question after that.
Yes, as long as the lore is not directly contradictory of anything that is in V Rising. I'm sorry, my dogs are going to scream because my wife just got home from the store. So if you can hear them, sorry. Yes, you are allowed to bring in your own lore. We will be making a new world map that has a bunch of like predetermined countries. So if you want to like be from Frankelberg or, you know, one of the other player submitted things, I keep pushing Frankelberg like it's canon. It is not, but it might be. I want it to be. So we will have a world map with a bunch of countries that have blurbs. So if you want to be from there and have like shared like cultural history with people, you can. So all of my characters from this, so like Nell, Memoria, Hush, like everyone I've talked about that was my character, they were from a place called the Sundered Isles, which was like my own personal place that I made up and had a very intense culture and religion for, that has its own Google Doc that's like 16 pages long. Nobody else was from there. That was lore that I wrote that's like pulled from like a novel project and then made vampiric instead of evil necromancers. You're allowed to do that. That's fine. As long as it's not directly contradictory to anything that's in the canon lore, you can go fucking crazy. Just make sure that, you know, low magic applies and all that good stuff.
Okay, so my big question is, I'm not sure if it's super complicated or not, but for implementing these out-of-world characters, like say if they were a deity or god in their world and they got like super nerfed and introduced into this one, what are the complexities behind like trying to keep them like basic, for lack of a better term, basic bitch as a character?
I would generally say that, okay, so for low magic is, oh, thanks, honey. I was given Starbucks. Thank you. Low magic is, you're basically limited to what you can do in the game, plus maybe a little more through rituals. So, like, you know, the spells that you cast are the spells that are, like, literally in-game. That sort of thing. So, being a deity or being, like, the remains of one is not really something that we allow with low magic. Not to rain on your parade, but we don't really want people to be gods or divine or even pieces of the divine for next season, just because the power creep is a lot. The other thing is that you coming to the table with a character that is, hey, I used to be a god, you're either expecting people to say, no, you weren't this bitch crazy, or have the buy-in of, oh, I'm talking to a god right now. Which, for a setting and a group as big as ours, is a little bit discourteous. I'm sorry, and I think that, I hate to say it, but because it's a low magic season, probably not the best character for this. That said, next time we have high magic, if you want to be like the baby shell of a god that's had their power yeeted and their universe destroyed, go fucking crazy, we don't care. Well, that works perfectly for a high magic season. That's totally fine. People are, Dreadthus was, Vampire Jesus last season. Blackwall did Full Metal Alchemist plotline literally and became truth, and
Hell yeah.
yeah, like people on high magic seasons do crazy shit. We just, just keep in mind, like Akira said, your neighbor and everyone else might be a god too. But we don't really allow for that sort of thing for low magic. Like you'll see, there are people right now who are planning to be to take the name of gods, like Hestia here, but they're not gods. We're not allowing gods next season, just because it's going to be low magic. Yeah, you are a rat.
So would it be okay to like introduce them as like an amnesiac character from another world?
Yeah, absolutely. They're like, I don't, maybe they're, because we do have in canon different realms. We don't know what those realms will be yet. If you have realm ideas, please submit them. We have not gotten enough lore submissions that are realms, to be frank. My wife just came in and put a power supply on her computer chair. Sorry. Sorry. I just got distracted. So if you are wanting to play like an amnesiac character, who's like from another realm or something, that's totally fine, because we do canonically have other realms. We've got like the voids, the dreamlands, a lot of stuff. A lot of those are subject to change because we haven't decided on our canon lore yet. But if you want your character to be from somewhere else, who is here now, maybe because of the magic fuckery, that's totally fine. Just know that we're not going to have realm walking this season, so you won't be able to go home. Your character can try to go home, but just know it won't work, because we're not going to let anyone realm walk.
They can die trying.
Yes,
That's
yes,
okay.
absolutely. But you're welcome to be from another realm. You just have to be a Joe Schmo. You're a guy. You can be an interesting vampire. You can be a vampire with like demon blood or fey blood or like shit like that. People do that all the time. But nobody can be Vampire Jesus this season. I'm sorry, everybody.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome to the party. I hope you have fun. Goodbye, get yeeted. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I am going to go drink my Starbucks and say hello to my wife. Oh, ruthless? I'm not ruthless. I'm trying to be nice. I'm sorry. I don't want to rain on your parade. If you have questions and you want to workshop something, if you want to workshop your character from another dimension, please open a ticket. We're happy to work with you to make something that's cool and memorable and works within the confines of the season. Yes, I will be posting this on our YouTube when we're over, because we do have a YouTube, by the way. It doesn't have fucking shit on it, but it does exist. So we'll be uploading all of our workshops this time around. I will be doing a bleed workshop probably next week, maybe the week after. And I know a couple of other admins, excuse me, I got the hiccups, also want to do workshops. So workshops are coming soon to a Discord server near you. We will record all of them and put them on the YouTubes for quick reference. But if nobody has anything else, I'm going to go ahead and close up now. Thank you for coming, everyone. Yes, if you have any detailed questions, if you want us to help you workshop your character, if you have questions about low magic, about what's allowed, what's not allowed, please open a ticket. We are happy to work with you. We want to get you somewhere where you are playing a character that you like, that is satisfactory to you. So please open a ticket. We do not bite. We are very kind. We're not going to let anyone be a god this season, but there's so many other possibilities. I promise you, we are more than happy to workshop with you to get you, somewhere that is satisfactory to you and the low magic requirements of the season. Because, we'd prefer not to say no. We'd prefer to be like, okay, but maybe we change gears just a little bit. Because, shut up. You don't even go here. You're not a part of our roleplay overview. This isn't a you problem. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and delete the recording now.